For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Alchemy of Pain. This is the podcast where we talk about painful situations that people might never and probably would never have asked for, but they changed them forever and for good and caused growth and expansion in ways that might not have been possible otherwise. So I always start by sharing how I know my current guest, and it's kind of serendipitous in that the last time I saw my guest, Reverend Jim Toole, he was officiating at my partner Mark's memorial service. I met Mark Roach and fell madly in love with him. And when he told me that he was involved with a church, I went like this. I had had a very bad and toxic church experience. And I said, honey, I'm glad for you, but I will never go there. And he was fine with that. But interestingly, they were having an intention setting ceremony on January 1st. 2018. And that intrigued me. And so I said, look, this doesn't mean I'm going to be showing up regularly, but that I want to go to. And I went, and I was deeply touched by a sense of love and non-judgment. I didn't feel like there was an agenda. And the gentleman that spoke led a guided meditation. And it was so beautiful that I said, I have to come back again and again and again. And I did. And Mark and I would share a pew. And Reverend Jim Toole was my minister during that period of time. Jim Toole is an inspirationalist. And he serves. Well, Jim, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here, Brenda. Good to see your smiling and beautiful face.
Thank you. It's nice to smile again.
It is.
And why don't you tell the audience how you serve in the world today, who you are today, which that answer could have changed based on a few weeks ago because we're all evolving and changing. But today, how do you serve in the world?
Well, I find myself in a situation where I'm really moved by my passion and my purpose to help people find their truth, find what they know matters to them at the core of their being, and more importantly, to be able to live that, to be that. I do all I can to encourage, to support, to inform and educate, mostly to inspire, so as to allow people to take steps that are necessary to look within, to pay close attention to what's going on in their lives, and in some cases, see for the first time what's actually going on there, not distracted by so many things that can be going on in life. So today, some writing, some recording, some teaching, counseling, and believe it or not, today I'm doing a great abundance of funerals. I know that sounds a little odd and unusual, but I am celebrating life with family after family after family after family, and getting to know these individuals and sharing with their families the love that they've got and the care that they've got, and helping them walking through the pain that they're going through as I'm helping to facilitate and celebrate their loved ones.
It's a holy function to walk people through their pain. And since this podcast is really about pain, painful situations, and probably the people attracted to it may be going through a dark time themselves, I know this is a broad brush question, but are there any general bits of guidance you can offer someone going through a painful time?
I just got through celebrating a woman who I spent the last several weeks of her life sharing with her on a regular and consistent basis. And in that case, got to know her on a deeper level than I normally would, facilitating a funeral or conducting a funeral. And I also counseled her husband, 30 years of marriage and sharing this beautiful life. And they were both aware that they were on their way out, and or she was on her way out, and that he was aware of that. So there was no denial about that. And they were having these conversations with me about some very interesting and deep things. In fact, sharing things with me they had never shared with anybody before in their life. Those times where situations become difficult and painful and seemingly ending, a lot of that gets shared at times. And my statement to each of them repeatedly was, be you. These two words are so important, helping people to stay where they are, be where they are. And sometimes that is pain, sometimes that is sadness. Not to deny that, but at the same time to also look to that spark of their spirit within and be able to walk through it with eyes wide open, hearts wide open, and minds wide open, and being able to experience it fully and completely, which in this particular case, and many of the others of the people that I work with on a regular basis do. I help them find here and now who they really are, and to be real with themselves and in the world about that, and healing some of their history. But be you would be the biggest statement that I think I would make simply about how to get through situations that are challenging and difficult, even when you don't know how to do what needs to be done or deal with whatever the solution, the problem is for the solution. It's to just be and stay in touch with what that is for you.
I wish that I had reached out to you after Mark's transition, because I found myself, first of all, shell-shocked, and then trying with toxic positivity to just get on with life and be good. And this advice to be you and to feel and allow myself to be real with what had happened, what had upended my life. That's excellent advice, and I appreciate it. And we're going to get to your story in a minute, but you said something beautiful before we started recording, because I've had to grapple with losing this amazing man. And for those of you who didn't have the privilege of knowing Mark Roach, let me just say this. He was every bit a guy's guy. I mean, he could get under the hood of a vehicle and fix it like that. He was MacGyver in so many ways. And yet he had mastery of his soul and spirit, and was a beautifully evolved spiritual man who lived by the 4 agreements. It was a privilege to be his partner, and he changed me forever. But I grappled with, why did I lose him so soon? He was 61. And to me, I wanted another 20, 30 years with him. And then I had to make peace with that he completed his journey. And I was just talking to Jim about this before we started recording, and there was something very beautiful you said about a symphony.
Well, we all are part of the symphony of life. In fact, we all strike our unique note, who we truly are individually. Can you imagine if everybody struck the same note? It would just be a big, it would be a hum all the time. And so the beauty is not to look to try to be something that society or your peers or anybody else. Being you has you strike your note as you are in a unique way. And Mark certainly struck his note real and true, and left too early, and yet left the symphony of life that we get to continue to live better because of the way he struck his note. And a beautiful piece of that puzzle is that when you strike that note that way, people notice. And when they notice, it isn't something just as an example, which he was a wonderful example of how to live life. it encourages and inspires you to strike your note. When you can see somebody striking their note like that, it's like this encouragement is the courage to be you and to show up living inside out and wide open, striking your note in the symphony of life.
I can feel him at times cheering me on to strike my note and to live fully and be who I was born to be. And I know the life I'm living today, perhaps if I had been in the comfortable Sarasota life that we had created together, it wouldn't have forced me to change in the ways I've changed. And I said before we started recording, the woman I am today is far different than the woman that you knew. And yet each version of us is absolutely fine. We just continue to grow and evolve. So, Jim, I have known you to be a healer. You've led beautiful guided meditations. You've served as a minister, a channel, mediumship, trance, all of these different spiritual gifts. How did that path open up to you? Who were you before? And is that the answer to the question, what is the pain that changed you forever?
Well, yes. You look at your life, and when you get to a place where you can look back and see it for what it truly is, it tells a story, and not a story that you have to be afraid of or have to avoid. And that for me began in my childhood. My childhood was disturbing, destructive, dysfunctional, beyond really the norms of even difficult situations that people have to go through. And I'm not alone, and I know that. And yet the violence, the alcoholism, the drug abuse, the abuse, and the neglect that I experienced as a child had me walk through pain that I didn't even understand. And what I had to do in that situation is become a survivalist. I had to, at a very, very early age, begin to learn how to take care of myself when I shouldn't have to. I had to learn how to be an adult. I learned how to defend my mother from my father. And I learned how to try to take care of my younger sister and to get through the times that I didn't understand and didn't know what to do with, and yet continued to survive and get through it. I can very easily say I was never hungry. I was never without shelter. My parents provided for me. I just don't recall a great deal of anything that was of a great positive nature. And to this day, the one thing that has affected my life, probably more than anything else, is never having a mother, never having a father. And unfortunately, my sister left at age 15 in an alcohol-related accident also. So I never got to experience what it was like to be cared for and loved by parents or to have a sibling. And I was on my own at a very, very early age and venturing out, thrust out actually into life very, very early through my teenage years and into my young adult years.
So as a survivalist, the goal is to survive. And what's interesting about us as children is we don't know any other way. So we just deal with the hands that we are dealt. Abnormal was your normal.
Yes.
And then you brought it out into young adulthood, surviving. How did you cope?
Well, the childhood trauma, as it would be labeled by psychologists, uh, caused me to have to find ways to make it out there. I actually, my mother and father split up. I was living with my dad for a little bit. My sister stayed with my mother, and I eventually, at the age of 16, moved out on my own. Unfortunately, got into a great deal of trouble, had my life threatened, had to return back to home and realized I wasn't going anywhere quickly. I had taken on the characteristics of my mother and father. I had, as science may not say, inherited alcoholism and drug abuse, but I was well on my way to living the same kind of life my mother and father did. So at some point at age 17, after being thrown out of school for dealing drugs in the parking lot, I went ahead and asked my father, can I join the Navy? And at 17 years old, I joined the United States Navy. And I have to say, although the next 4 years would be very destructive and disturbing and difficult, it saved my life. It's likely that the Navy and being in that kind of more structured environment introduced me to rehabilitation, introduced me to the 12-step programs. And so I went from living a life that was challenging, seemingly would have learned after experiencing the way my father was a violent alcoholic and my mother slept a lot, and my sister passing at an early age due to an alcohol-related situation. I would have learned, but I didn't. And I have a disease. I can very gratefully say that this year I celebrated 45 years in recovery. And for
Wow.
that, I'm very grateful. So that's an evolution out of that. But the key to me, the absolute key to me in looking back at both my childhood, my lack of family, my having to take care of myself, joining the service, being forced to find rehabilitation, and successfully, fortunately, staying in that program and being able to make it, shaped who I would become in my life. Absolutely. The 12-step program introduced me to spiritual principles I didn't understand or know. It introduced me to what it was to be of service to others. And in the program, in the first 2 years, I was working with being in the administrative aspects of the program. I was actually doing meetings, conducting meetings in jails and prisons in the first 2 years of being in the program. And the spiritual principles of the program were waking me up to this connection that I had in my heart and my soul that I didn't know. Although I was raised Catholic, although I went to parochial school, well, until I got thrown out for fighting in 4th grade, I was I couldn't learn, I guess, that everybody was trying to teach me, right?
You
And
know,
I was
Jim, I love, okay, so this is what is so awesome about your story, and that's going to inspire many. Your little aside comments, yeah, well, I got thrown out of here, and oh, well, my life was threatened here. And I mean, you've got some war stories, and you went through some stuff, and you blew it royally. And in a lot of ways, because you didn't have the structure of a parental home that could nurture you. And yet, here you are today, someone who serves with such love and power. You have a beautiful home, a beautiful marriage. I mean, this is a hopeful story, because everything you're telling me that's dark and sad and painful, it is a redemption story. And through the 12-step program, you found connection. There was a connection that was always there, yet uncovered, and it started to blossom.
Yes, as I could feel the way that the spiritual principles of recovery would quench my thirst and would have me satisfy my hunger for what my heart and soul was looking for, I began to look outside of the program to other ways I could learn, I could serve, I could share. And there is when I began getting involved with spiritual organizations, with churches, and ministering at varying organizations in the area, helping open spiritual centers and to serve from that place. And the beauty for me is every situation that I experienced leading into my purpose and passion as I am expressing it today was a catalyst that allows for me to know in my heart and soul what people are going through. When someone comes to me and talks about abuse, I'm not understanding it from a book that I've read or a class that I've taken. When I hear about violence or neglect, or I hear about addiction, or so many different things, the hell I had to go through took me to heaven, would be one way of describing it. Open my heart and soul to be able to know what it's like to live through pain, and yet to have that be the catalyst for change, for creating a new life, for being able to find my truth within me, which wasn't the absence of love or the absence of family or not being nurtured or taken care of, but it strengthened me and encouraged me to not only be able to be more of who I truly was. Each of these situations forced me, although I made the decision, to do something about them and to learn what it takes to get beyond the limitations of these difficulties that we sometimes have to face in life, and to find that inspiration, that spirit, that spark, that love, that encouragement within us that allows for us to make it through each day, whatever it is we might have to face, whether it's childhood, adult life, or a loss like a family member or something like that. There are ways we can look within and find our truth and be them every day.
Healing is possible. You can come from brokenness and become whole. You are living proof of this. One of the great shifts for me, and I would love your take on this, I came from a religious upbringing, and then I had a conversion experience, which was profound. And that guided me into a series of church relationships, one which was quite toxic. But I found that even though in my heart, I felt that I had received the Holy Spirit, I was still grasping for God's attention and trying to be good enough to garner favor. And a powerful shift occurred when I realized that the spark of the divine was not something I needed to grasp for, but it yet was inside of me. Now, this is a non-denominational podcast, and whatever works for you, whatever you want to believe, I honor. But I have to tell you, when I stopped trying to get God's attention and I realized that it was there all the time, that there was something I could draw from, a wellspring inside, that sometimes I clogged up myself, but that didn't mean the wellspring went away. This connection that you found, can we talk about connection and how important it is to have connection?
Well, for me, it's a matter of looking at what the meaning of life is. I frequently find myself in stores or in restaurants, and I'll have a server or a clerk ask me, are there any other questions you might have for me? And I'll say, yes, the meaning of life. And they'll say, well, as soon as you know what that is, let me know. Although I'll tell you, there are some who immediately say love, family, different things. That these are the people that have stopped long enough to look at what really matters to them. Now, we're all raised in different ways. We're all introduced to different faiths and the way that we see things. I was raised Catholic, and yet for me, I named my nonprofit Spirit of Life. And the reason I named it Spirit of Life is it's the most universal way I could describe that spark, that inspiration. Each of us have our own unique way of looking at what our faith is and what it means to us, what matters to us, what we maybe look to when we feel like we need encouragement or inspiration. And yet to continue to remember, we are a reflection of that Spirit of life, of whatever we call it, in whatever religion or whatever way we see things. We are an expression of that, a reflection of that. We are the light and love of life, constantly showing up each day as a representation of that, whatever we believe. I frequently will say, it isn't as much what you believe in, but that you believe in it. And to the degree that you believe in it, it will serve you. In the program, it talks about God as you understand him. And yet it can be anything that we know within ourselves brings to us what we need to know who we truly are, to show up that way. And honestly, Brenda, some of the most important characteristics that we can consider are so universal and have nothing to do with religion or belief. Compassion, kindness, understanding, acceptance. When we first find them for ourselves, we are able to be those with and for other people. And so the journey does begin, as you spoke about, within. We look to all different kinds of sources to try to live our lives as best we possibly can, and introduce them by family and by friends and so on. And yet when we take that time, I call it being the I am. And for me, that is that spark of my spirit, of my soul, reflected through the love of my heart into my life, into every word, every gesture, every interaction, every relationship, whether it's my family, my friends, people on the street, people I'm counseling or ministering to. It makes no difference. It's always returning to what you just talked about, that spark of light and love and life at the core of our being, that is actually a reflection of our faith. Whatever our mind might commit ourselves to, or our being commits ourselves to, it's really coming back to being it in life. It's a for me, it's something I do every day and enjoy being able to.
There are so many different, I'm taking notes throughout all of this, and each time I'm like, oh, that will be the title. Oh, that will be the title. And return to the spark. Oh, that could be the title. You've given us so many gems here. I want to speak to the pain that says, how could a good God allow this to happen to me? And then creates division from the connection.
Well, it feels to me, looking at my life, that there would be some that say I'm can be stubborn sometimes. I like to call it determined, or focused, or something like that. I don't mean in a negative way, but I see my truth and I choose it, and I choose to be it. And that can sometimes look like being a little bit stubborn, and yet it isn't so much to reflect it onto someone else. It's to look at who I truly am. And every reflection that I've had to experience of pain in my life that kept me from having hope, or kept me from being able to believe things are good, that created fear or even terror, opened me up to a deeper experience of myself. It's easier to say today than a lost child or a wandering and wondering adult trying to find my way, and not really understanding, and just doing the best I can with what I've got. Really spending a great deal of my life looking for those answers. And they've evolved over time. They have, having studied all the religions, having studied so many different philosophies and dogmas and creeds, looking for answers, and realizing, once I had seen all of these different faiths, that the answer I was looking for was in my heart. It was the unconditional and boundless love of my heart was the doorway to finding what the meaning of life was to me, and what really matters for me. It has to start there. And then I can be all of who I am, inside out and wide open, and show up for my wife, for my children, my grandchildren, my family. I lost my relationship with my son in the process of my addiction. And it was many years before I was able to reconnect with my son. Literally lost connection with him. In fact, I did not get to see him from age 4 to age 15. Saw him briefly again a dozen years later, and about 6 or 7 years ago began the healing process with him. Having a daughter and wanting a grandfather in her life was the catalyst for now today. Not the father-son relationship that I would have had having him my whole life, and yet having that relationship and healing it is something that's come from it. And it's come from finding that and being that and trusting that. You know, you asked me earlier about something, about maybe a kind of an answer that could help us with this feeling. I have come to the place in my life where I know at the deepest level, it's okay. It's okay. What does that mean? It means that I trust what I believe at the core of my being, in my spirit, in my heart, that it's the way it's meant to be, and that it's part of this evolution of my life that has brought me from hell to how. I was just speaking to my wife. I said, my God, we have a Hallmark life. We have this beautiful home. I never had one. I have this wonderful wife. I've had one and didn't work out as well, and relationships galore. And yet it took me a while. But you know what I became, Brenda? I became the love. I became the home. I became the person that could then be that with someone else, like the angel I am now married to. Oh. It wasn't about finding it in the person or the relationship or anything else I was pursuing, because I had never had it. I was constantly chasing it. And when I found it within me, when I found my truth, when I found my love, when I found my faith, and for me, it's okay is the statement of my faith. And that I can walk through life knowing that it's meant to be the way it is. I then met an angel, was able to help care for her in a time of pain and loss like she's never experienced. And yet it has allowed for us to grow and be so close and have such a wonderful life. So yes, from a destructive, disrupted, dysfunctional childhood with no family and nothing at all, to healing the relationship with my son, developing a relationship with my granddaughter, having 2 stepchildren. Now I don't call them my stepchildren, Kyle and Nikki, and Nikki has now had a daughter. And so I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and I'm able to have this beautiful life filled with so much love and so much nurturing and so much caring, and being able to give it as well as receive it, and to share it. So it's very interesting to see this evolution that you've brought to my attention again in this series.
I've got goosebumps because it's a beautiful story. It's a hope-filled story. It's a story about love. And, you know, I thought when Mark transitioned that was it, because he passed soon after my mom, and it was like 1-2 punch, boom, stick a fork in me, I'm done. And I wasn't done. And it wasn't until another series of things occurred that I finally had to hit the mat and say, for me, it's just love. I'm just here. I can't figure anything else out right now, except I'm just going to love and let love in. And it simplified everything for me and helps me walk in this world in a way that sort of is in agreement with what you said. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, to encourage our audience with, it's okay. That's a lovely thing. I asked what I should make your title, and you said inspirationalist. I like that. What made you say that word?
Well, you know, I've been serving my whole life from the time I could. It was church after church, pastoring a church several years ago for quite some time. And then COVID came and changed that. And what has happened is I've been thrust into being able to take a closer look at me. I mentioned to you before we started recording this time recently of serving for others, serving for churches, doing what others need, and fulfilled my purpose. It fulfilled my passion. It helped me be able to give and to learn and to grow. Having removed myself from that, and then deciding to, my goal right now is to help people make their way through what's going on in this world and in their lives. And we know, looking out there right now, every time we look at what's going on out there, we can't even imagine some of the things that are occurring. And so helping people make their way is the key to helping encourage and inspire and having people live better lives. And so today I returned home. Home is where the heart is. And everything that I think or feel comes from that place of knowing the I am at the very core of me, and not necessarily philosophical. That's easy for you to say. Not necessarily philosophically or from even a spiritual standpoint, although the pure, perfect presence of my spirit reflected through my heart is my purpose in this world, to share in the various ways that I do in my writing and my recording and in this interview today, and in any way I can teach or share or counsel others, to help them be able to say, which isn't always easy to say, it's okay. Not based on circumstances or situations. You were talking about love. The reason that love is the answer for me is it's unconditional. It's who we are. It's not what we just give and receive. It's who we are at the core of our being. And when we're in love within ourselves, the conditions and the circumstances and situations shift and change. We're able to surrender into this place of being nurtured by the love we are, rather than the love we feel like we have to get from somebody else or something else. And yet, by being it, we're like a beacon that's reflecting it and sharing it and shining it out into the world for others to be able to feel and experience, and maybe to ignite their flame of love within their hearts, for them to be able to experience themselves differently. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. And so we all get a chance to be who we are. And if those of us who can be beacons can shine bright enough for others to see their way a little bit better, all the better. All the better.
People
for sure.
want to know how they can find you and follow you, and perhaps even seek you out to help them make their way. How can people connect with you, Jim?
Well, I have a website, spiritoflifeinternational.org. I have a Facebook, Spirit of Life International, or Jim Toole, LinkedIn, Jim Toole, Spirit of Life International. So they can look to those sources for being able to contact me. And there's resources on the website that might be helpful to them to make their way. I continue to provide resources for that. I'll be opening up a new space in downtown Sarasota, a physical space, now that we're back to doing that a little bit more. I'll be online a lot, but opening a space in downtown Sarasota to be able to share and teach there. So all the contact information for that and so on will be on the resource page of my website. And you can contact me through any of the contact information I provide.
So I am so glad that because of Mark Roach, our paths intersected so long ago and continue to grow and evolve as our lives do, and as we both serve and fulfill our purpose in life. Jim Toole, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Brenda. I love you, and I love what you do in your work, and I'm so appreciative to have the privilege and the gift to be able to be a part of it with you.
I feel like there is a third unseen here, Mark, probably smiling, that we're having this conversation. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to this edition of The Alchemy of Pain. So many gems of wisdom from someone who went from hell to heaven. What an inspiring story. Thank you again for tuning in. And as I say to end every podcast, if you are in a dark place, like the caterpillar in the chrysalis, keep pressing. You're creating strength in your wings so that you can fly.